Hey guys, Clayton here. Welcome to 2021, and okay, I know this is late. I know that I'm really late on this. It's nearly February. We're already at the beginning of 2021, and yeah, I think everyone said 2020 sucked. The virus, the deaths from the virus, the ignorant people surrounding the virus, the election, just... Oh. And it also didn't help that a lot of movie theaters closed down, and a lot of the movies either went to streaming or just got pushed back to this year. But the reason why this list is so late is because I wanted to be authentic. I didn't want to half-ass it. I wanted to give you guys the authentic top 10 best and top 10 worst that I can give you. And I had to look all my way, just take some time. I still had to work, but also just to take the time I need to watch these movies and give you guys a proper top 10 best and top 10 worst. And this is what this video is. We're going to start with the worst just to get all the crap out of the way from a crappy year like 2020. And like I say, this isn't usual for me. If you like some of the movies I put on my worst stuff list, this is totally fine. This is just my personal opinion. You're not an idiot. You're not below me. None of that. We're all different in our opinions of movies, and that's a good thing. But before I do get to the list, I have only one dishonorable mention, and that movie is The New Mutants. Now, I'll say it like this. It's not Dark Phoenix or X-Men Origins Wolverine bad. It's just forgettable. It's just a generic-ass PG-13 horror movie. That's basically it. I admire it for going in a different direction similar to Logan, but it could have been so much better. But it's a step up from Dark Phoenix, so that's a good thing. Alright, let's see what kind of crap 2020 left. We're counting down
the top 10 worst movies of 2020. Number 10, Mulan.
And no, I won't be doing a dishonor on you bit.
Of the live-action Disney remakes, this one's probably the weakest, and it's a shame because I wanted to see what they would do with this, given they were trying to do something different in telling the legend of Mulan. Unfortunately, the biggest issue is trying to make it interesting. This is an incredibly dull movie. The reason I feel that way is because it's trying to take itself a little too seriously, considering there's no comedy to lighten things up. Yifi Lu may look like a live-action Mulan, but sadly she doesn't have the charm of the animated movie, making her just as dull, and it made me care less for her. And she's the main character. It doesn't help either that they decided to give her some sort of chi, which basically defeats the whole purpose of why she's so relatable. The other characters aren't much better. The only character I did like was the witch and Commander Tung. And the whole filming in Xinjiang in light of the Uyghur genocide and even crediting thanks? Yeah, it's another can of worms altogether. But on a lighter note, it looks great, and when there is action, the choreography is well done, and they are all mostly the highlights of the movie. And I'll give it this, I'll still take this over Mulan 2, that did the characters more injustice than this. This, it just could have been so much better. Number 9, Antebellum. This was one I was looking forward to due to the marketing for being so vague and mysterious. And what I thought was going to be a tie-jumping psychological horror, it turned out to be 12 Years a Slave meets The Village. The concept is somewhat clever, almost akin to The Twilight Zone. The problem is the execution of it. The biggest problem is that not only the execution could have been fleshed out more, and like the Mulan remake, it tries too hard to be taken seriously given the themes of it. Compare this to movies like Get Out or Us. They're on the surface horror movies, but they have a sense of humor. This could have benefited from it outside of the obnoxious comedy relief who's in the movie for a little bit, maybe to poke fun of how ridiculous the twist is. Now granted, not everything is bad. The acting is good, namely Janelle Monáe, who I feel has a promising career. The movie is shot beautifully and the score is great. It unfortunately doesn't save a not quite so good script. But at the same time, similar to The Village, it might grow a cult following in the near future. Number 8, Dolittle. This was another one I was looking forward to since it's the first big movie Robert Downey Jr. is in after Endgame, and the trailer made it look like a promising family adventure. The results turn out to be nothing more than a series of random stuff happening without much motivation and most of the time feeling rushed. At one point, it is that decent swashbuckling family adventure, but then it becomes a bad talking animal movie like two movies trying to clash with each other. Though it kinda makes sense given that it was reshot with a different director. Robert Downey Jr. is trying, but his performance comes off like he's trying to do a Jack Sparrow-esque one, accent and all. And despite having a really talented cast for the animals, they're mostly one-note characters that are annoying and tell lame jokes. And of course, there's the infamous moment where Dolittle gives a dragon a prostate exam that leads to it farting in his face. Yeah, Tony Stark died for that, folks, and I'm sure Robert Downey Jr. will bounce back after the shipwreck of a voyage. Number 7. Coffee and Kareem. Ever wanted to see an R-rated version of Cop and a Half? Or as Austin Burke referred to it as a bad American version of Hunt for the Wilder People? Then may I present Coffee and Kareem, the charming story of a foul-mouthed youngster who hires criminals to scare his mother's police officer boyfriend, and now they gotta save themselves from some of Detroit's most dangerous drug kingpin. Sounds perfect for comedic hijinks, right? Well, it really isn't. It's nothing more than a cliche buddy cop movie that is not only unfunny, but mean-spirited, obnoxious, and childish. It's like a bad mix of a family movie and a raunchy comedy. And it's one of those R-rated comedies that mostly rely on cursing every few minutes to get a laugh, but they do it so much it gets more annoying than funny. And that also applies to the titular Kareem, to which I don't want to be too mean towards Terrence Little Garden High, as he is doing what he's directed to do, and I can't blame him for that, but he is among probably the most annoying child characters I've seen in a long while. But he's not the only one. The rest of the cast is just as annoying and unlikable, the only exceptions being Betty Gilpin, Ed Helms, and Taraji P. Henson, who are trying to do what they are working with, but eventually they're reduced to nothing but screaming and yelling. Though despite maybe getting one or two laughs, this ends up mostly being forgettable, and by the time I finish talking about it, what was I talking about again? Number 6. Capone. Considering this is from director Josh Trank, I'll say this: it's better than Fanforstic, but this still wasn't very good. The concept is great. I like the idea of the last few days of Al Capone suffering through dementia while having nightmares and hallucinations of his past, but what we get is a complete mess. There isn't much in terms of plot other than watching Al slowly deteriorate, literally crap the bed, and there's even a scene where he's just straight up farting. It doesn't build up for any character, giving me very little reason to care about what happens to him. And there are times where it comes off as embarrassing or even unintentionally hilarious. Not just from those moments mentioned, but Tom Hardy, who has given his all, but it's hard to understand what he is saying most of the time. And for the moments that it's trying to be funny, it doesn't work mostly because dementia is no laughing matter. The editing, while I like the idea first to make it look like we're seeing what Capone is seeing, but after a while, it looks like it was edited bad on purpose. And it also shares another problem with Fanforstic, in that at times it's a drag and it comes off boring, but has a ridiculously over-the-top ending. But what it does put it above Fanforstic is the way the production is nice. Despite not understanding him, Tom Hardy does a good performance, as does my girl Linda Cardellini. I hope Trank will get another good one like Chronicle. This was slightly better, but not by much. Number 5. The Wrong Missy. Time for another Bad Happy Madison Netflix movie, and this time starring David Spade, who I think can be funny in movies. This unfortunately isn't one of them. Like some of the Bad Happy Madison movies, it's bad, it's dumb, it's full of cliches, par for the course, right? But what shoots this to my number 5 and why it's so bad, it's because of the titular Wrong Missy herself. She's one of the most annoying, obnoxious characters in one of these movies since Jill from Jack and Jill. She even makes Sandra Bullock from All About Steve look normal. And it's made even worse when at the end you're supposed to sympathize with her, in which I couldn't, especially after all the crap she put David Spade and even the audience through. And it's one of those is that if you switch the genders, all the stuff happening wouldn't seem as comedic. It probably would have worked better as a decent romantic comedy because Spade and Molly Sims' characters have decent chemistry, instead of this unfunny mess. Now, as bad as this movie is, I will say that while it's up there with something like Ridiculous 6, it's probably slightly better than that, and for 3 reasons. 1, it's short. 2, there's maybe like 1 or 3 moments that I did chuckle, compared to Ridiculous 6 where it was just 2 straight hours of not getting a single laugh, not even chuckle. And 3, as obnoxious and annoying as Missy is, Lauren Lapkus is committed to the bit. She's trying, so I can't entirely blame her. It's just a poorly written character. It says something when Hubie Halloween was actually decent after watching this bad comedy. Number 4. Bobbleheads the movie. From the writer and director of some of Disney's best movies and the studio behind Food Fight comes something not quite as horrendous as the latter, but more on the lines of Norman North, without the meme value. I say that because this movie is boring. It's nothing but a series of stuff happening and our main characters just doing things. Except unlike Dolittle, where it was surprising how shockingly bad it went, this again, boring. For a movie that's 82 minutes, it sure felt longer than that. It seems like it's trying to be like Toy Story, but it doesn't work because the characters aren't that interesting and the writing isn't good. The animation is passable, but the constant bobbling of their heads just got nauseating after a while. I thought it was neat at first, but then I was just begging them to stop because I was starting to get sick. It's also a waste of a talented cast who are mostly given one-note characters to play off of. And why have Cher if she's only in it for 1 or 2 scenes? And this is more than anything feels like a commercial for Bobbleheads, almost to the point where I want to apologize to Ugly Dolls. At least that movie had good intentions. The sad thing is, a Bobbleheads movie could work if given the right material, but this feels like wasted potential. The only interesting thing about it is the behind the scenes drama that happened with the writer and director. Though speaking of wasted potential... Number 3. Fantasy Island. This is another one that could have worked as a horror movie given the concept. Instead it turns into a generic as hell horror movie, even more so than New Mutants. It's another boring horror movie filled with cheap jump scares that doesn't make sense at points. The mystery of the island isn't written or handled well because it doesn't explain it, and we don't really get the qualities of the island. I can admire giving the characters arcs and a purpose in the story, but most of the time they come off as cliche horror characters. Jimmy O. Yang and Ryan Henson especially are supposed to be the comedic relief, but the jokes come off as annoying and cringeworthy. And as much as I like Michael Pena, he feels miscast as Mr. Roke. He doesn't have as much charm as he's meant to be, and he also feels like a waste of Michael Rooker as well. And then there's the twist ending. This has got to be one of the most ridiculous twist endings to a horror movie I've seen since The Gallows. Not just because of how mishandled it all was, but when you really think about it, none of it makes any sense in the long run. Again, this could have been so much better with the concept given, but its execution was just a bad fantasy come true. Number 2. Artemis Fowl. This has already been considered to be the last Airbender of the 2020s so far, and for good reason. And believe it or not, this is worse. At least I was able to follow The Last Airbender despite how much they screwed that up. Never before have I felt so lost and confused during a movie that is nearly 2 hours. The reason is because the pace is so fast, there isn't time for things to develop plot or character. It doesn't explain about the magic in their universe because it doesn't slow down, and it's just scenes of sloppy exposition. Again, I don't want to be too hard on Ferdia Shaw because, again, he's doing what he's directed to do, and this is his first movie, but Artemis is so obnoxious and unlikable that I couldn't care about what happens to him. Judi Dench and Josh Gad, who are usually good actors, their performances just have them doing a sort of Batman-esque growl throughout, which is really baffling. Though speaking of baffling, there's this moment with Josh Gad's character.
It's feeding time.
What the hell was that all about? Anyways, the only character I liked in this was the butler and Holly Short, to which I wish the movie was all about her. And I'm speaking as someone who hasn't read the books, but from what I've heard from fans, this makes the Percy Jackson movies look like Harry Potter in comparison. This seemed like an interesting concept, but after this mess, maybe one day Artemis Fowl will join the series of unfortunate events and Percy Jackson, and get a more faithful adaptation in the near future. And the number 1 worst movie of 2020 is The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. From the director behind The Haunting of Sharon Tate comes a new movie that, if you can believe it, is actually worse than that. It has the same problems that his previous movie had. It's an exploitive and boring cliche horror movie that has bad writing and acting, but what makes this worse than his previous movie is how tasteless and shameless the portrayal of everything is. From shaming Nicole, saying that she brought on herself, to the graphic depiction of the titular murder. It's done almost like a slasher movie rather than being subtle about it. But after just exploiting the death, we get more exposition by showing the real crime scene photos and a montage of newsreel footage that not only pads out the runtime, but it also breaks its own rules by having the newsreel contradict the movie's claim of OJ not being there when in reality he was there, but he claimed to have probably blacked out. That is embarrassing. I've mentioned before that I'm an advocate for giving movies a chance, but this is one that I strongly recommend not giving any support or attention. True crime murder cases make insulting horror movies, and this will be a textbook example of that in the future.
And those were my worst movies of 2020. Thank you all for watching, and let me know, what are your worst movies of 2020? List them down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Anyway, this is Clayton, signing out, and look forward to my best movies of 2020.